happen. And you notice there's not a lot out there. So it shows a low pressure trying to develop right there. And we do have a storm that is going to form. And so it's kind of interesting. And there's actually, I don't think there's even a forecast coming for it. But so some of the models are completely missing this over there. So this is what Google AI is trying to do, the experimentation. This is, if you look at the top, it says preview, and there's a very good disclaimer at the bottom. I love this disclaimer. I'm just going to read it. Weather conditions and cyclone tracks are approximate and for informational purposes only. They are not intended for consumer use. Okay? For official weather forecasts and warnings, refer to your local meteorological agency or National Weather Service. That is a great disclaimer that I love they put on there, because even James, when we look at stuff like this all the time, and Lily does too, we use a lot of experimental data, but we even know sometimes we don't release it because it's not, we don't want people to think it's an official forecast.
It's the double-edged sword of the wonderful society we live in, where anyone can access the data, anyone can verify the data, but then you have to always fact check who is posting on this Facebook page. Oh, it's Brad? Okay.
Yeah.
This
is accountable. And that's why I like looking at these as tools, right? Anybody can go to Lowe's. You can buy every tool a contractor can use, right? But very few of us should be rewiring a power box, doing plumbing, building a house. Just because you can buy and go get the same tools doesn't mean you know how to. It still takes a craftsman or a contractor, in our case a meteorologist, to interpret the data. And we actually have sound science that shows, hey, we can do better with the tools combined than just the tools by themselves or just humans. I always like to tell people too that, like, one of my favorite apps, and this is no endorsement, is Waze, right? Waze, the GPS app. The thing I love about it, it's Google as well. It's got algorithms, it's got automation, but it also has human inputs, right? The crashes, the stuff on the road, the speed traps. So the combination of humans and the technology makes the app amazing. And in weather, that's the way it works as well. The combination of these great algorithms and AI combined with humans is going to end up with the best forecast. In the Hurricane Center, they're the best example of this. Just look at their forecast skill. It is unbelievable. So I think we'll probably talk more about this as we go into the hurricane season, as AI becomes a bigger part. And we'll be tracking these storms through the evening. You see them moving up from Georgia. So we'll keep a close eye on those as we get into the evening hours. And if we have to, we'll cut back into WCNC Plus. We'll talk with Vanessa about this, but it's probably going to be closer to 11 o'clock. But as always, every night, we almost run out of time all the time, is don't leave. In 2 minutes, Vanessa Rufus is going to be back in here talking about the breaking news stories of the day, and there's a lot going on news-wise, and we'll join you again tonight at 11. See you then.
everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Live Impact News this evening. I'll be your host for the next couple of hours. I'm Vanessa Rufus. Right off the top, we wanted to get to some breaking news just into the Live Impact News studio, and this is regarding TikTok. So we know the ongoing situation with TikTok, the fact that it has to find a new buyer and basically divest from its Chinese-owned company, parent company. Sounds like we're just getting this news from NBC News that President Donald Trump is set to create an extension for the search here to find someone to buy the social media platform. So the push here really is to try to keep TikTok operating in the U.S. So we're hearing he's going to do this via executive order this week and essentially, once again, extend the deadline for TikTok to find a new owner. We know that there's been, of course, the whole, impetus behind this, the fact that there is a bipartisan law that is in place at this point, which does ban TikTok over national security concerns. The Beijing-based parent company ByteDance has to sell to a non-Chinese buyer or basically face this nationwide ban. And this is an extension. We mentioned that we've kind of been seeing this getting kicked down the road, kick the can down the road, if you will, because back in April, you remember that the president extended a previous deadline by 75 days to avoid the app being disrupted. So we're going to, of course, see where this goes. Once again, this is set to be done via executive order and sometime this week. So more information on that to come. But in the meantime, we'll kind of set the table for what we're expecting over the next couple of hours together. We've got a really interesting dialogue about domestic violence coming up in just a little bit. And we've done so many stories here, terrible stories, heartbreaking stories about how this issue is impacting so many people in the Carolinas and, of course, nationwide. And we're set to hear from advocates about what the trends are looking like, but also what the resources are looking like, because there are, of course, lots of questions about funding on the federal level, on the state level. How are things going on that front? So we're set to hear more about that. So please stay tuned with us. In just a few moments, we'll be getting that interview for you. But meantime, we had a really big issue today out of Lincolnton, and we just got an evening update from police giving us an idea of this person who they say they have in custody now over threats that were made, threats to shoot in downtown Lincolnton. This actually kind of kept the area on lockdown for quite a bit. And so Lincolnton Police late this afternoon shared an update with the very latest. Let's get to that full briefing just so we can catch you up to speed. And once again, as always here on Live Impact News, we'll break in with any big developing news.
So my name's Brian Green, and I'm the Chief of Police here at Lincoln Police Department. I have with me Captain Tony Potts, who is over our CID and narcotics, and I have Sergeant Randy Carroll with us, that is the sergeant over criminal investigations. So at approximately 9:35 this morning, we received a phone call from a local news station, an employee there. He called the office and reported that someone had called the station and said that they were going to come to downtown Lincolnton. They had a firearm or a gun, and they were going to shoot people in the downtown area. So I was notified while she was transferring the call to our communications center, so they dispatch our calls. I was notified of the call by our secretary. We immediately got officers to the downtown area. We had officers patrolling, as well as officers out on foot. The Sheriff's Department was also notified, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. They provided officers to patrol the area as well. We walked door to door to each of the businesses to warn them of the threat that had been made and asked them to lock down, stay in place, as well as warning people on the street to clear the area. The city sent out a message on their mass email system to notify the public of what was going on, and the businesses as well. We were in the area for a number of hours. We were able to pretty quickly to identify two suspects. One was identified by the caller, and another subject was identified from call history based on the phone number that was used to make the call. We were able to clear that individual who lives in another town After a little bit, we were able to talk to him and verify that he was not involved. The other subject, which is a Gerard Sharon Moore, and that's spelling Jerrod and Moore Moore, of 305 Rollins Street, Stanley, North Carolina. He's age 43. We were able to identify that he had been to the city earlier that morning. We were also able to identify that he had been on one of the back streets in downtown and actually had fired a firearm multiple times. We basically started looking for this individual. We identified his vehicle. We were able to ultimately locate the vehicle at the end of Arrington Place. Lincoln County Sheriff's deputies as well as Lincoln police officers took this individual in custody without incident. He was sitting in the vehicle, and we were able to recover a firearm as well. So he has been charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, going armed to the terror of the public, and discharging a firearm in the city limits. And further charges are pending. He received a $250,000 bond. So, do y'all have any questions?
What do you guys think about the bond that he received?
So, I mean, we would always like more, I think, but I think this was a pretty good bond.
And he did fire the shots. Did he fire them up in the air? Or
They were fired into the ground.
into the ground?
What street was that downtown, Chief?
And so it was on Sycamore Street.
Can you repeat what street you found him at or stopped him at?
It's Ironton Place. Yeah. It's IRONTON and then Place. It's out in the county.
Do you know if he has any history?
He does have an extensive criminal history.
One shop owner mentioned how you were as much as possible, and they were satisfied with that. What do you say to that, especially, in partnership with the county sheriff's office as well?
So we took the threat very serious. We didn't know how credible the threat was to begin with. Once we were identified that he had been in the area and that he had fired, we started sending out additional messages, hey, this is a credible threat. We also expanded. We left officers downtown on foot, but then we also had other officers out patrolling the rest of the city because we did not have a location at that time where he was.
About what time did he fire the firearm in the city?
It was roughly around 7:30.
Around 7:30 this morning.
Call was
About 9:35.
so it was
Yeah.
before.
And that was to call to our department, but he had called the news station and made the threat prior
Right
to that.
about that time, do you know?
I assume so. I assume there's no delay
Yeah.
in the report from the reporter, and we do appreciate the taking the time to follow through on this. So,
Can you tell us that news station?
I mean, we'll just say, if they want to identify themselves, they can identify themselves. So.
And can you go over his charges one more time? Possession of firearm?
Going armed to the terror of the public and discharging a firearm in the city limits. And we were looking at further charges.
And do you know what his felony conviction was?
I think there's some drug charges, and I think there's a previous conviction of possession of firearm by a felon.
Chief, you spoke of, this is one of your press conferences, obviously, a high crime area here in Lincoln. I'm looking at the sign that says near perfect. Still, amazing response to secure safety in the public area. Talk about just your drive and ability and want to keep public safety.
So, I think it's in every police officer's heart. I think you ask any police officer why they get into this business, it's to help people. And so, identifying this threat, I say all the time that our police department, and so we have a relationship downtown with our downtown businesses. We have an officer that's their assignment to patrol that area. And so we have a lot with those individuals as well. We all pretty much know them by name and stuff. So, all our citizens are important to us, but we were just able to respond quickly to the area.
Any idea why he did this?
No, ma'am.
Do you know what his specific threats were, what he said he was going to do?
So it was identified that he had a gun and that he was coming to downtown Lincoln to shoot people. So thank y'all. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
So we'll have a copy of a press release for you, as well as photos of the individual that y'all can take as you go out. Yeah. Thank y'all.
Hey, folks, there you have it here on Live Impact News. We shared for you in full the latest briefing from Lincolnton Police regarding that lockdown that had to happen in the downtown area for several hours, starting around 9:30 this morning, when a phone call was apparently placed with concerns over a potential shooter in the downtown area. That individual, who police identified as Gerard Moore, located around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sounds like he's facing several charges, including going armed to the terror of the people, discharging a firearm within city limits, and having a firearm as a felon. He is being held on a $250,000 bond in the Lincoln County Jail. We'll keep you updated as we get more on this particular case. Meantime, we do have some updates to share on a dialogue that we first started to kind of broach last week. You might remember that we had the CEO and president of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce here on Live Impact News to talk about Helene recovery, how that's going. Of course, we heard him push for folks to come and visit the area, go up to the high country. Lots of places are open. Lots of businesses are waiting for visitors. But he also mentioned some concerns over funding from the government, how funding was basically, he thought, maybe being held up in some of the political process. And we heard the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce essentially say that he felt like any sort of Helene recovery, Helene relief needs to be pulled out of the state budget and voted on separately, because he felt like it was being delayed as folks kind of debate multiple points within a budget. We spoke with various lawmakers today on that front about their particular stances. Our Julie Kay looked into basically how the fact that there is just less than 2 weeks left for North Carolina lawmakers to pass that state budget. They do remain deadlocked over how to deliver on the next wave of recovery for Helene victims. And so in particular, we have some local reaction. We have Mecklenburg area Representative Laura Budd, who spoke with Julie about her thoughts in the situation. So let's listen in on their dialogue, and of course we'll pop back in with more updates.
And it already, this most recent aid package already passed the House. So what are some of the things that you're hearing about that kind of back and forth?
I hear they're working on a fishing bill today, shrimp trawling. Yeah. The idea of placing hurricane relief for Western North Carolina into a budget where it has already been thoroughly discussed and dissected that the budget is going to be an issue. We're going to take a break for a few months while the budget conferees try to work out a compromise. And all I can think of is people need to fix their homes. They need to jumpstart their businesses. They need to pay their bills. All of the things that need to be done. And Washington's in chaos with the FEMA funding issues that are already there. And you decided to put this into the budget? Why? There's no benefit for that other than to make it a political football.
So this, for, you know, from your view, this is about timing and getting it out there as fast as possible.
It is, because when you're hungry, you're not less hungry because it takes longer to get food. Your house doesn't get fixed faster because you waited 2 or 3 months to pass the bill that would provide the funding that would enable you to fix your home. Tourism is the #1 industry out west, and in order for the West to grow back, build back with resilience and its tourism industry, they need the money. The small businesses need the money. And what we've done instead, and I say we as in the General Assembly, is the House has passed this bill. And while I don't think it's all of what we need, and it's not nearly enough at this point for all of the entities and organizations and individuals, it was a step in the right direction. And it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate's response is, we're going to put this in the budget. We'll let you know.
The budget is kind of historically something that takes a long time to get through. So
The fiscal year is June 30th. I don't think anybody other than teachers and retirees understand that that's the 30th because most people don't expect a budget now till October-ish.
And I know they've talked, right, and they talked about, a mini budget to hold us over, that kind of thing. But it is, I mean, it's June 17th. We're getting incredibly close. Do you think that there's any possibility the budget goes through, or are we just kind of assuming it'll be after this break?
I think it'll be after this break. I have heard that they're still stalled out. I've heard some of leadership has already left or is leaving at the end of this week to go on vacation. July is historically a slow month for us, and so is August, to give the legislators a break. The problem is for the people in Western North Carolina, they don't need us to go take a break when they need us to be governing. The way to handle this was not to say, in an effort to coerce you or bully you into passage of a budget that we like in the Senate, we're going to insert Western North Carolina's relief package so that we've got some leverage. No, the responsible thing to do, the right thing to do is to say, here comes the House bill. Let's analyze the House bill. If we really think there ought to be changes to make those, and they need to put it up for a vote.
I know some Senate Democrats are like working to push that to a vote. I don't know if you've been talking to them at all about how quickly that might happen. Do you think that's something that's possible, or is it kind of too split right now to know?
I think it's too split right now to know, but I will say that God willing and the creek doesn't rise, maybe we'll get this passed before we take a break the end of next week. But again, what I'm hearing is that the Senate has kind of put it on ice. They're going to wait and see what is going to transpire with the budget, and then they're going to decide what to do with the money.
I am glad you mentioned kind of the federal level too. We're dealing with the FEMA funding issues, and different funding sources are less clear than they have been in the past.
That's polite. That is polite.
How does that play into everything going on at the state level, at the local level? This makes, I'm sure, everything you guys are doing more important.
I think it elevates the fact that the state government is your first line of defense, and in this case, for building back and taking care of North Carolina residents. Instead, done is say, well, Washington's on fire. The FEMA funding's kind of up in the air with things. We just got the denial of 100% reimbursement for debris removal. Well, that's a $200 million price tag right there, where we're going to now need to pick up the check. But instead of addressing that piece, it was, oh, well, let's just put all of this on ice and we'll just wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, like I said, people have bills to pay, they have homes to rebuild, they have debris to remove, they have businesses where they need things like inventory and the lights on, but without money, they're not able to do that. And the response from the Senate has, to be fair, the Senate Republicans has been, you can wait while we go on vacation.
Anything else before we start talking about other bills that you might want to talk about Helene funding that you want to get out there?
I am a perennial optimist. I am hopeful that cooler heads will prevail, egos will get out of the way, and we can hear from the Senate this week that they're just going to consider this bill as a standalone for relief for the western part of the state, because otherwise my heart hurts for them, because they're waiting on us to be the grown-ups in the room.
Any other things on, kind of your agenda, on your watch, things you're working on? You mentioned House Bill 805 that you might want to mention.
So that's one that's back up for a vote in Senate Judiciary tomorrow. That is my Preventing Exploitation of Women bill that I ran with Representative Neil Jackson. That was not just a unanimous vote across the aisle, it was also by men and women in the House. And what it does is it really looks to empower women and give them back a measure of control. So let's just say you have a person who made some choices early on in life and ended up in an industry where someone took pictures or videos of her, and maybe they paid her or maybe they didn't. Maybe she had socioeconomic issues, like she's on receiving some kind of state aid, or maybe she's a college student trying to pay the rent. Maybe she has a substance abuse disorder. What we've done is try to craft legislation that gives women the control back, because that is the number one thing that prevents women from re-entering society, for lack of a better description, is that fear, because those images and videos are online. And so this gives that woman control back, because she is able to request the removal from the entity platform provider, and then they have 72 hours to remove what they have possession and control of. You don't need a reason otherwise, and there's no charge. And the AG's office has agreed to take the lead on the law enforcement side and their private rights of relief too.
How did the idea for that come about? Did someone reach out to you with a story, or is it just something that you'd heard was an issue?
I have long known that it is an issue for women and girls because people make decisions. You know, they say the internet's forever, social media is forever. So I have teenagers, so I am familiar with poor choices. Thankfully, none of mine have been caught up in that. But again, I'm familiar with a decision to take a picture or send a video can last forever. Then on top of that, I was talking with Representative Neil Jackson, who is a good friend of mine across the aisle. And actually, he brought the idea to me, and it married with the interest that I've got. So we're cautiously optimistic this will exit the Senate Judiciary Committee without being layered with policy, which is what happened last week. And I said, you took a really good bill that did a lot of really good things, layered it with policy, and made it the political football. So we'll see.
I think people will also appreciate that, you're working across the aisle for that one. That's, cool to see people come together for something that everyone can agree on.
I think a lot of eyebrows were raised because he is so conservative, whereas I tend to fall, to the left. They're like, wait. Jackson and Bud did what together?
Kind of sweet.
Right. We're going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya next week.
And then
towing is still up. Towing bills coming along.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Did you have particular questions about any of the other stuff?
I guess I was just curious, in Mecklenburg County, this is a big deal right now. Obviously, the transit, that's chugging along. It's been in committee this week somewhat.
It was in transportation last week, and then it was in finance this morning. It has passed both committees. I would say it's still got some struggles. It is not where it needs to be. And I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions from various folks on both sides of the aisle and in and out of the Mecklenburg delegation. So I'm not really sure exactly what will transpire with that. And I especially don't know the Senate's thoughts. But I will say that Mecklenburg has long needed a solution to the issues that we are confronted with. And this is certainly a step in the right direction to at minimum acknowledge those issues exist in Raleigh. And that I am optimistic on.
All right, well, that's all I had. Unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
No, I have some super sexy issues and some not so much. So
well, thank you for doing this. And
no
if you have anything going on, just shoot me a text. We're always looking for stuff.
All right, I'll let you know how Senate Judiciary goes.
Right,
they really took the bill. I mean, let's put it this way. I got the PCS notice at 9:30 at night from the ACLU. My colleague, Representative Jackson, got the PCS at 9:30 at night from another advocacy group, one of the more conservative ones. And let's just say by 8 o'clock in the morning, we were both like, wait, what did they do to
All right, so you're hearing our Julie Kay catching up on various measures that Laura Butter, representative from the Mecklenburg County area, has been working on, including, you heard her stance there on the Helene recovery. Just a quick reminder here, you heard Julie allude to this in her interview there with Ms. Budd, but Senate Democrats are pushing for a vote on a standalone aid package for Helene, separate from the budget, and this is because there was a $464 million relief bill that passed the House last month. And so things are kind of stalemating at this point on that front. We will definitely get you the very latest on this situation, as well as the budget, because we talked about this. There's a deadline coming up less than 2 weeks away where this actually just needs to get done. We want to turn now to some aerial images that we're getting here into the Live Impact News studio. You actually saw them briefly in a 3-box with our interview we just shared with you, but these are 2 separate fires that we're seeing burning in the California area. So the first one, you can see that's El Dorado County, so that's being called the Bonanza Fire. Technically, this area is Shingle Springs, California, but some of these aerials coming to us out of Sacramento and our coverage partners there. But there are evacuations in order for that one, so that's the box you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Reported as a grass fire, has actually burned multiple vehicles already, and there are evacuation orders, as we mentioned. The officials there are calling this life-threatening conditions for folks who would choose to stay in the area. So they actually say CAL FIRE's reporting immediate threat to life, lawful order to leave now. The area is lawfully closed to public access. So that is certainly something that is going to draw concern, of course, for folks in that area. Reports that this started a couple of hours ago, perhaps, this is Bonanza Auto Road, if you happen to be familiar with this spot. It started about 5 acres, grew to about 25 acres, and at that point, it sounded like the evacuation was necessary and imminent. So residents in a couple of roadways reported there to leave. And we have for you, of course, we mentioned the right-hand box that is a separate fire. This one is coming to us out of the San Diego County area. This one is much larger. It is being called the Monte Fire. It's about 200 acres. It is 0% contained. There are evacuation orders for this one as well. This one is spanning many more streets as far as the evacuation is concerned. And it looks like anyone who is being asked to leave that area is asked to gather at a local Walmart supercenter that's kind of just outside of the impacted area, but close by enough that folks can use that as an evacuation point. And they are closing a few roadways in that area. Here's what we're learning about the sparking of this fire around 3 p.m. local time, so less than 2 hours ago. It looks like this started on El Monte Road, and within an hour, the fire had grown to the 200 acres we see it reported at this time. Once again, 0% contained, and folks in multiple areas around here are being asked to leave and seek shelter elsewhere. We've got, of course, some really big billowing clouds of smoke, so potentially some concerns with air quality in the area. This does also appear to be, you can kind of tell from our shots here, hilly area, heavy brush, some trees around, so potentially plenty of fuel to burn. And also, you know, if you are starting to get into heavy, thick areas, hilly areas, that could potentially be something that firefighters would be looking out for as far as things to try to navigate around and try to get around. We know, of course, here in the Carolinas, as we had been dealing with wildfires, you know, closer towards the beginning of the year and into the springtime, we were definitely seeing how the terrain was making issues for folks. That's always something that kind of catches our eye when we see reports of difficult terrain for the crews who are working on scene here. So we will continue to keep an eye on things. Once again, 2 separate fires, if you're watching here on Live Impact News, just joining us, that we're seeing El Dorado County and San Diego County. So, you know, these will be 2 feeds that we'll keep an eye on throughout the evening. That said, we wanted to kind of turn the attention back towards what we had mentioned at the top of the hour. We had talked about the fact that we were expecting to have a pretty robust discussion about domestic violence this evening, and we also mentioned how we have been doing so many stories, it seems like recently, with folks who were speaking out after either experiencing this or, you know, their concerns with resources or funding and whatnot. We wanted to bring one of our more recent stories to you in case you missed it, because I mean, it's such a compelling story, such a heartbreaking story, but this woman so brave to speak with our Tradisha Woodard about seemingly what sounded like the absolute very worst day of her entire life. She lost her 6-year-old daughter to a murder-suicide at the hands of her ex-boyfriend, domestic violence situation where he took her daughter's life and then he took his own life. This happened in Anson County, and she finally, you know, after speaking with Tradisha, decided that she wanted to share how this impacted her, what this meant to her. So we wanted to pass that story along to you now before we dive into the discussion here with our domestic violence advocate. So let's listen in.
March 24th of 2025.
It's a date months behind on the calendar.
It's not fair.
But for Michelle Little, that date has never left. It loops quietly in her mind like a broken record. Michelle recaps the moments leading up to her daughter's death, a pain she can't escape. She says her and her boyfriend, Michael Rufus, had broken up, but he still lived with her to help co-parent their 6-year-old daughter, Mayanna Roach.
Was on one side of the house. He was on this side of the house. Literally pulled me out of my bed, had me on the floor. He covered my mouth with his hands and told me I better not yell or I better not scream with the gun to my head.
She says he then threatened her, took their daughter, and drove off in her car. As Michelle contacted police, she says she received several texts from Michael, including this picture of their daughter sleeping.
He told me I brought her into this world. I would take her out of this world.
Text messages also show Michelle asking him to bring her daughter home. His response: "For years, I've been telling you I'm gonna off myself, and I'm taking everything with me if you move on." Rufus also often referred to himself in third person, saying, "He tried so hard to love you, he kept all his demons away. Now we are out to play."
As he said, if we can't have you, then no one can. So who is the we? Him and his demons.
Michelle says she only spoke with her daughter on the phone briefly.
I asked her, was she okay? And she said yes. She said she was sleeping.
Deputies eventually spotted Michael's vehicle. After a high-speed chase, it eventually crashed here, near Little Creek Road.
He crashed. We heard my baby scream, and then the phone hung up. I knew then that he did something.
Officials later confirming 2 gunshots, a bullet for his daughter, another one for himself. Police reported Mayanna died at the scene. Rufus was reported dead after being taken to the hospital. Michelle says Mayanna loved taking pictures, loved being with her brothers, and loved hanging with her dad.
She felt safe with him.
But still, he ended it all. Now Michelle breaking her silence and sending a message, not just as a grieving mother, but as a voice for every victim of domestic violence. She says, get out now. It just may cost you something greater than your own life.
Ladies, we gotta pay attention. We gotta watch who we have kids with. Woman's intuition, pay attention to it. Don't never avoid it.
Tradisha Woodard, WCNC Charlotte.
I mean, such an emotional conversation and just one story of the countless domestic violence stories that we have across our region, across the nation. So we wanted to kind of broaden out this discussion here because we hear time and time again when we talk about these cases, you know, you heard the woman there tell Tradisha Woodard, get out while you can. Trust your gut, know that it's time to leave. But you want to make sure, right, that there are resources when people do make that decision to leave a situation. We have Kathleen Lockwood, who's joining us from North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Kathleen, you're the policy director. And we thank you again so much for joining us tonight and taking the time to speak on this important topic. We wanted to bring you in just because we do hear, you know, the fact that there is a need. People need resources when they are trying to get out of these situations. But we want to make sure that the resources are robust and they're there. So how is the picture looking like in North Carolina? Are y'all still needing more resources, and how are you going about things if so?
Absolutely. So in North Carolina, we have domestic violence service providers that provide services in all 100 counties in the state. They are funded through a variety of sources. Some of that is state money, some of that are some different federal funding, as well as local funding and donations. Programs have seen donations go down since COVID and unfortunately not return. And while state money has been helpful, it's really been fairly stable for many years now, while we've seen the demand for services increase. So domestic violence service providers from 2018 to 2023 saw a 51% increase in demand for services. And at the coalition, we often hear from advocates kind of the picture behind the numbers, and they shared with us that during that time period, they're also seeing folks present for services with much more escalated violence, so much more dangerous situations, unfortunately, which means it's more resources that they're devoting to helping each person who's presenting needing help in our communities. And unfortunately, we also see that bearing out in an increase in domestic violence homicides in recent years. We know this is a problem that will continue to be present in our communities, and it's unfortunately just becoming more and more dangerous as programs aren't necessarily having all the resources that they need to meet the demand that's coming in their doors.
I mean, it's really tough to hear, as you characterize there, not only is it more of an issue, it sounds like you just kind of characterize it as things are getting more aggressive and more damaging, impactful with each case. And I mean, we here in the Charlotte area have covered, several of these cases so far this year, I feel like. And I mean, talking about the resources, I know that y'all have tried to get together as these groups to kind of advocate for more, if there is more to be had. I know that recently you had a special day actually back in April where y'all went to Raleigh and tried to speak with lawmakers. Tell us about that effort. How did that go? Do you feel like you got the response that you wanted? Is there more that you felt like could have been done?
Yeah, so we partnered with the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Child Advocacy Centers in North Carolina to bring the story of victim services to Raleigh and let them know how important our work is and how much we still need to be able to meet the growing demand for services. So we had a number of domestic violence service providers who took time out of their very busy schedules to educate their lawmakers and talk about what they needed. It was, from the participants I spoke to, a really fruitful conversation. They really felt like lawmakers understood how important their roles are in our state. We know that lawmakers are really struggling with a lot of demand for state money, especially with Hurricane Helene happening in our state. And so they're having to make some really tough decisions. And we asked them on that advocacy day if they could provide us with $10 million in annual state funding in addition to what we already received to make sure that our programs can stay stable as federal funding may be rocky in the coming years. We did, like I said, get some good responses from lawmakers who really seem to understand the issue. The state budget is still very much being negotiated, but we have seen in the Senate's draft of the budget as well as the House draft of the budget that they would increase a source of funding that goes to domestic violence service providers in the form of marriage and divorce filing fees in our state. And that would allow those programs to receive about $4 million extra a year distributed throughout the programs in the state. So we understand it's not $10 million like we asked for, but $4 million each dollar can really help make sure programs stay open and continue to help each person that comes in their doors. So we're grateful for what we can get at this point, and definitely grateful that lawmakers are prioritizing this with the limited funds that they have available to distribute in our state.
Is there anything specific about the climate right now, or just, certain influences in general that are happening that you feel might be behind some of the trends we're seeing with domestic violence, the increase in severity in cases, or the fact that we just have a higher demand? I'd heard at one point, from one group, perhaps maybe the economy sometimes can play a role, but I feel like that's probably just one factor of what might be many things.
Yeah, so what we know about domestic violence is that stress within communities and within families is often felt in that domestic violence relationship. So those stressors often can be economic stressors. So when the economy gets tight or unstable, individuals feel that in their paychecks and the price of groceries, and they'll take that stress home with them. And if they don't have the coping skills or the good example of healthy relationships and how to manage stress, that can come out in the form of domestic violence. In the same way, if we see political unrest in our communities or stress related to natural disaster, we also see domestic violence increase around that. And so we know that we're living in really stressful times in the state and in this country for a variety of reasons. And unfortunately, that is bearing out in increases in domestic violence. We also know that the presence of a firearm in a home increases the likelihood that domestic violence will end in homicide by 5 times. So if there's domestic violence in the home and a firearm is present, we're more likely to see death by firearm be the result. And unfortunately, when we look at the numbers for the increases in domestic violence homicides that I mentioned, in 2024, we saw a record number of 94 domestic violence homicides. I believe it was over 80% of those involved the use of a firearm. And when we look at the increase in domestic violence homicides in the last few years, we really do see that increase correlating also with a graph of the increase in firearm possession in our state. So it's a combination of all of these stressors in our community making domestic violence happen, and the increase of firearms making it more likely that domestic violence will lead to death, unfortunately.
Now, I'm curious about the actual needs to address the issue, what's out there. And I think back a couple of months ago, I had done an in-depth look at the relationship between violence against people and violence against pets. And one of the aspects that I explored with that topic was how folks will probably be surprised to see that not all domestic violence shelters can accept pets, and sometimes that can make a difference with someone making a decision, do I leave a situation and leave behind my pet? And obviously there are some shelters that try to get around that with other ways, like a fostering program, or they have a safe place for the pet to go separately. They don't get to stay with their owner. But so I think about that as being one need that I was had my eyes open to that existed out there. But is there anything out there that you see as just a really big need that y'all are like, it would be great to have this addressed sometime soon?
Yeah, I could go all night with a long list of needs, but I think you bring up shelter, and that really reminds me that not all communities actually have a domestic violence shelter, unfortunately. And those that do, we have heard from those programs in recent years, they're often full for up to half the year or all of the year. So when someone calls in crisis and they're looking for somewhere to stay in their choice to leave a domestic violence relationship, there may not be emergency domestic violence focused shelter available for them. We've also heard from domestic violence service providers that as the affordable housing crisis really is ramping up in all types of communities, rural and urban in our state, folks who are in shelter are having a lot harder time finding a place to go after shelter, which means they're staying longer, or when they do leave, they're facing the choice of being unhoused or living in a homeless shelter with their family, or returning to a home environment that feels very dangerous to them. So when we look at kind of tackling some of these other issues in our community that are difficult and add stressors, that also is tackling helping folks responding to domestic violence. You mentioned pets. Pets are often a reason that people stay in unsafe situations in the same way that children, and the ability to pay for a roof over your head are also reasons that folks stay in situations that otherwise they would leave because they're unsafe. So ways to make sure that our families and everyone in our community has the ability to make a living wage and to keep their jobs is also a way to keep our communities safe from domestic violence homicide as well.
Such a multi-pronged issue. I'm just wondering, is there any research out there, or any ideas about preventative, I guess, if you will, preventative measures, to get ahead of the issue, either before a person maybe becomes violent, or before a situation perhaps even escalates to that point?
Absolutely. So the Center for Disease Control at the federal level has published a lot of really great research and continue to fund prevention work across the country. NCCADV, where I work, actually has a program and multiple staff focused just on this issue, researching and promoting prevention strategies. Some of the things that we've learned along the way and been promoting is, like I mentioned earlier, talking about healthy relationships from a very young age, making sure that folks growing up in our communities have access to stress coping mechanisms. In addition, we talk about societal or community level prevention factors, so things that decrease stress in a community or make it easier for folks who are experiencing unsafe situations to find resources and support in their community before it turns into escalated domestic violence. So some of those things are called protective factors in our community. So things like strong community cohesion. So even just knowing and being in supportive relationships with your neighbors can actually prevent domestic violence, because it allows for relationship to reduce stress, and it also allows for folks to have a place to go when they need to just kind of work out some stress or take a moment away from one another if things are escalating in the home. In the same way, paid leave is something that we talk about as a prevention factor. If folks have access to paid leave to help them build stronger relationships and family-child relationships when a child is born, that child is less likely to experience domestic violence, and their parents have a lot less stress when welcoming that child in the world, which also prevents violence from happening in that relationship. So you mentioned it's a multi-pronged. There's really great public health research that really gets into those prongs and kind of makes connections that we ordinarily wouldn't think of as domestic violence prevention, but actually do stop the violence from happening before it starts. So programs like going into schools with this prevention work and domestic violence programs, those direct service providers that I mentioned often have those prevention programs and work in their community to do that. Some of the funding challenges that I talked about earlier have led them to have to cut those programs or to be concerned about future staffing needs around those programs because they aren't considered core. So when we fund our core services, it allows those programs to also focus on prevention measures so that maybe they won't have as many folks coming in the door asking for help once it's already a violent situation, and we can focus instead on keeping our communities healthy and safe from the jump.
Now, you just mentioned the fact that, it does feel maybe a little bit uncertain or rocky with, what funding might look like in the future or going forward. I guess how are y'all, as advocates, feeling about the situation? Do you feel optimistic that, eventually this will be a short patch that eventually you'll get over and maybe more funding will be more, certain down the road, or does this feel like something that you'll really have to keep fighting for, keep pushing for in the future?
So we consider this a long-term need. We have, like I mentioned, really great support at the state level in recognizing the need for increased funding. Unfortunately, we're not sure yet if we have that same support at the federal level. The fiscal year 2026 budget negotiation process is really in its early stages. All that's happened so far is that the president has released a budget proposal that he suggests to Congress what he'd like to see in the budget. And unfortunately, his budget proposal suggests cutting funding under the Office of Violence Against Women by $200 million across the country. So we are in an environment where we need more, and we may be looking at less in the near future, particularly with this current administration, if those continue to be the priorities coming out of the federal government. We also know that there have been reductions in federal funding for many years now, unfortunately, under the Victims of Crime Act, which has led programs combined with that increased need to really be working on shoestring budgets. And so we're really concerned that if there are additional cuts from the federal government or any delays in federal funding making its way here to North Carolina, it will literally result in some programs having to close. And when that happens, the nearby programs kind of take on that role, and they're continuing to do more with less as well. So we are really kind of sounding the alarm that this is a crisis right now before we get to the point where programs close and there are even less resources available to our community. And we're buckling down for this to be kind of a long-term discussion with our decision makers and within our communities about how do we plug these holes that we see coming in funding, and how do we also show up for all of our community members in new ways that might not be as funded the same way moving forward.
So given all that you've said there, if folks are watching at home and they say, A, I want to learn more about this topic, how can I become more educated about this? And B, let's just say someone says, I want to help, what would you recommend that they do?
So I would look into your local community, who are the service providers there. A lot of times those needs are really specific to where you are. You can go on NCCADV's website, which is where I work, nccadv.org. We have a Get Help page where you can put in the county where you live, the counties nearby, and it lists out who those service providers are. you may want to reach out to them and see if there's anything they need as far as donations or as far as volunteer support to kind of help them keep going. And if you have the financial need or the financial ability, this is definitely the time to consider contributing to those local resources. And then engage with your elected officials at the state, local, and federal level. Let them know that this is a concern you have and that you're watching to see how they address it. Because I go to Raleigh regularly. I'll be going to DC next week to talk with our lawmakers, and it's always important and helps me a lot if I can say, and they know, like, you're going to hear about this when you're at home in your district. Like, this is something that actually matters to your community, not just something that matters to me personally. So for folks that are concerned, kind of be a part of that conversation, lifting up that this is a need that you want to see addressed.
Anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with before we wrap things up?
Just if anyone is in need of services themselves after hearing this, that Get Help page I mentioned on NCCADV's website is a great place to learn about the resources near you. You don't have to be a resident of a county to access services there. So just reach out and have a conversation if you think that would be helpful for you moving forward.
Kathleen Lockwood, thank you so much for your time. Once again, folks, you can find more information too at the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence website. And we just so appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And we do hope that you come back and join us here on Live Impact News. Give us any updates as your efforts go, or if there's anything you feel like we need to highlight for our viewers going forward.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. And we'll remind folks, too, as well, another resource, we wanted to make sure that you knew that there was also a domestic violence hotline that you could either call or text. So the number is 800-799-7233. And then there's the text line. You could text the word START to 88788. But as Kathleen just mentioned in our chat just now, there are some local resources as well. So a wealth of places that you could go to try to get the help that you might need, but the hotline there, as you just heard. We want to turn the page now to a situation that is grabbing some headlines nationwide. Comes to us out of New York City, and there is a video that folks have really been paying attention to here. But the New York City comptroller actually just got out, but was released following an arrest related to an episode encounter with federal officials at the federal courthouse in the city. He and his wife were serving as advocates for defendants in an immigration court, and authorities accused him of assaulting law enforcement and impeding a federal officer. Department of Homeland Security, in fact, weighed in on the situation, saying, quote, "It is wrong that politicians seeking higher office undermine law enforcement safety to try to get a viral moment. No one is above the law, and if you lay a hand on a law enforcement officer, you will face consequences." We mentioned Brad Lander, the comptroller, has been released. He denied the assault and basically said, "I will not characterize the events, but I certainly did not assault an officer." So we have video of that arrest that we can take to you now. Is there audio too? Okay, we'll go ahead and listen in.
You don't have to. I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant? You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens asking for a judicial warrant.
Cross we go too. Sorry. No way. Abstain. Where are you taking him? Hello?
Hi, I'm the Controller's Press Secretary. Where are you taking the Controller of the New York?
Where are you
the
taking
City of New York?
And with what authority?
Why are you arresting the city controller, and where are you taking him?
We got a security detail. This number one is going to go with him, all right? Hang on for his number one. Hold on.
Who's number one?
That's his number one right here, all right? Thank you.
It is a place of intimidation.
Okay, so also important to note, the gentleman, Mr. Lander, is actually running in next week's Democratic primary for New York City mayor. We've seen the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, weighing in on this. She actually, I'm going to paraphrase because on TV, I couldn't read the statement, but she says Brad Lander's arrest today was total BS, but she didn't say BS. She wrote, when elected officials are being detained without cause, we have to ask what the hell is happening to our country. That is her statement. She posted it on X. We also have his response too. So we wanted to bring that to you tonight here on Live Impact News. So I don't know if it's just him or if we have various officials who are a part of this. Okay, so Brad Lander commenting here on the situation and his arrest, his reaction. We'll listen in here on Live Impact News.
King's March with, 75,000 people we had out this weekend. And a lot of people asked, what more can we do? And I think showing up to bear witness and accompany is one important thing that all New Yorkers, or many New Yorkers, could do. And I will be doing it again. I didn't have my phone upstairs while I was detained, so honestly I have no idea what my schedule is and when. But yes, I guarantee you I will be back here.
Brad, the governor mentioned right at the top that they're not pursuing charges or they've dropped the charges, but what DHS put out was that you put your hands on a federal officer and you were being charged with obstructing justice.
Seriously?
So, I wonder what your response is to the way DHS characterized it for 4 hours before you came in.
I mean, so I have not seen, literally, I didn't have my phone, and I literally just walked out of the building, and I haven't had a chance to read one thing. I do know that while I was in there, Meg got me a lawyer, and so, but I mean, I take it seriously. It's like, I know I'm going to have due process. I mean, I don't know. I trust that, the governor said that they informed her that the charges are being dropped. I don't know because I haven't, seen or heard any information.
That's exactly what they said.
Okay, I'm reading it.
I said you assaulted an officer.
I mean, you guys all saw it on video, so you know exactly what happened. And I think probably on advice of counsel, I will not characterize the events, but I certainly did not assault an officer. I engaged in anyway. So, but I guess I just think here's the thing. Like, I know I will have due process, and I will have a good lawyer, and my rights will be protected. But Edgardo has no due process rights and no lawyer, and is going to sleep tonight in God knows where, in an ICE detention facility. And so is the name of the guy beforehand, Fock? What was his name, do we think? Zed. Zed the same, and you should have seen it. I mean, Courtney was in the room when they told Zed in French, though his native language is Yoruba, that, the dismissal of his case meant he had no status. And I think he asked back in French, what do you mean I have no status? Why? And he's not going to have a lawyer, and he's not going to have due process, and that's why I was here. And I'll certainly defend myself in court if DHS pursues charges. But what this is about is making sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a lawyer, to have their due process, and defend themselves in court.
Hey, Natural and Nadler.
Hey, 5 fellow mayoral candidates came here within 90 minutes of you being arrested.
I thank all of them.
Called out for your release. What does that say about the tenor of the mayor's race, that here we are, voting has already begun, we're a week from the election, and people are racing down to your fence?
Was one of them Andrew Cuomo?
No, I wasn't going to say that.
Imagine that. Look, I mean, this is a critical time to have a mayor who will stand up to ICE and stand up to Donald Trump and insist on due process and the laws of this city. This is a sanctuary city. I was proud to co-sponsor those laws, and I'm going to show up and defend them. And partly why I'm running for mayor is that New Yorkers deserve better than a mayor like Eric Adams, who sold New Yorkers out in a deal for his own pardon with Donald Trump. And New Yorkers deserve better in a mayor than Andrew Cuomo, who on that debate stage last week, when I asked him, why did you deny those immigrant subway cleaners who risked their lives during COVID the prevailing wage and the health care they deserve, all he could think about was, hey, were they, and I couldn't believe he called them illegal. And you could tell in his head all he was worried about was, would it reflect badly on him? And what New Yorkers are deciding right now is, will we have a mayor who stands up for the traditions of this city, who protects immigrant New Yorkers, and who protects all New Yorkers. I am very grateful to the other mayoral candidates who came out here to call for my release, to stand up for those traditions, and I really hope New Yorkers will elect one of us.
So Brad, I want to ask you,
Courtney.
Brad, there are a lot of people who are going to say that this is a political stunt. I mean, I can recall back to 2013 when Bill de Blasio was arrested outside of the bench, and that helped propel his mayoral campaign. Do you think that this is going to give you some sort of boost? And what do you think? What do you say to people who think that this is just some sort of political stunt?
So first, I'll just say this is the third week in a row I've showed up, and the reason I started coming, we've got Murad Awadeh from New York Immigration Coalition here. I don't know, a few weeks ago I saw that as they started stripping people of status, as they started dismissing cases, religious leaders and observers who were here had been arrested and denied their right simply to sit and watch. And that was when I said to my team, I think it's important for us to go down there, and I hope other elected officials will as well. And I reached out to some, not candidates for anything, to say, I think we ought to show up in court. I don't know what they'll have us do. I expected to sit in a courtroom like we did for a minute and just bear witness and watch. But as soon as I got up in the elevator, a lawyer with immigrant heart said, hey, this person has just been stripped of their status. Would you just try to lead them downstairs? And that was a 25-year-old guy named Camilo. He had like a 2-year-old named Brian who was scampering around, and they were both like, Camilo was shaking. And, he got in the elevator with me, and we went downstairs, and we really expected to have him grabbed like Edgardo was. And when we got into the building, I mean, we both like, got an apple and a yogurt, and I got on the train, and I'll be honest, I felt more useful in those few minutes to doing the job elected officials should be doing right now than I have at any moment since Donald Trump was elected. So I went back upstairs again, and I said to my team, we'll be back here every week as long as we do this. And that's how I understand what the responsibility of an elected official in New York City is. I did not come today expecting to get arrested. I came today just expecting to do that again. And I really think I failed today because my goal is to get Edgardo out of the building so he can back into the family. And that is what I want.
Brad, you were in Newark, Brad, you were in Newark.
Yeah, I mean, I think on advice of counsel, I'm gonna wait and let the case play out. I mean, you could watch the pictures.
Brad.
Everyone, guys, that was the last one.
Brad.
All right, excuse me.
Brad.
right there, ABC
Brad.
Yep.
This was all feeding, right? Okay.
My goal was to walk Edgardo out of the building. I can't tell you the bit of, we got to walk one family out today. And that's this family of 4 that's back at home. And nothing would have made me happier to then be able to get in that elevator and let Edgardo go about his business. That was what I came to do, and it was all
Brad. We were in Newark, and he was there.
Okay, so you heard there from the comptroller himself, Brad Lander, upon his release. He alluded to this, you heard in the briefing, the fact that the governor, the New York governor, was there. She accompanied him during the release, but had noted to him that any charges apparently had been dropped against him. There's also a spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office there in that district saying that there would be no court appearance for Lander, but it does continue to investigate the matter. With that, we want to turn to another briefing. This is from supporters in the situation, so you're going to hear their thoughts on this arrest.
Any indication as to, no, Marcia, we were here and we're doing this. Do you have any indication as to when Brad will get out? Do you know anything? Have they told you anything?
I know that when Brad went into the elevator, and I will start over for you, I know that when Brad went into the elevator, one member of his security detail from the NYPD was with him. I know that he is being held in the building. I'm not sure on which floor, and we have been told that he is well, and I don't know when he's expected to come out.
Thank you.
What are they telling you about why? Can you tell us what happened? Were you with him?
I was with him. So let me say again, my name is Meg Barnett. The last name is spelled Barnettete. I am Brad's wife. I joined him today because this is the third time that he has done court watching here, and I have been moved and horrified and found his stories very compelling. And
Folks, we'll try to get back to this briefing in just a few moments, but we want to break in with a new feed that just came into the Live Impact News studio. Looks like we have authorities now addressing the weekend assassination of a lawmaker and her husband, as well as an attack on another lawmaker and his wife. We're going to get some information here, so let's listen in and we'll regroup after this briefing.
Willing to you to see him in those images?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just to me like somebody trying to hide their identity, which is quite honestly a little different than when we see like mass shooting incidents. People have historically in this country not hidden their identity because I believe their intent is to be killed or kill themselves. That's how they see it ending. And that's different in this case. In this case, it was clear that he didn't plan on dying. His plan was to escape.
He wanted to keep going. Based on the list, potentially.
It appears that way.
Tell me about realizing, your officers then realized, well, the exchange of gunfire. What can you tell me about how that played out?
Yeah, and I will just caveat that with, clearly that officer is under investigation for using deadly force. And so that investigation is being done by the BCA. And so I won't talk a lot about it. But to give context of what occurred is when he exited his car, he seen that Mr. Bolter was up at the door. He paused for a second to do an assessment, didn't say anything, just was assessing, waiting for his partner to pull alongside him, who was just a car length behind him. And then the door opens, and what we now know is Mark opened the door, and immediately Mr. Bolter started shooting Mark in the doorway. And that's when the officer who had his gun out immediately engaged the suspect, who was dressed as a police officer, had the mask on, and immediately engaged him, started firing at him, trying to get him to stop from shooting Mark.
Wow. And then it sounds like Belter went into the home.
Belter immediately went into the home and then continually fired. And then the officer, I surmise, it could still see him because the officer still was trying to engage and get an angle at shooting Mr. Bolter. And then you can continually hear the gunfire going on in the house.
You told me you believe in addition to the Hortmans, Belter shot the family dog?
Yeah, the family dog was found severely wounded in the house and ultimately was euthanized.
Just when you got sort of the full scope of how gruesome this scene was, how did that hit you emotionally once all the details kind of came together?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thought was just really practical about like how many other victims are out there, like how many homes did he get to before we interrupted him. I knew that we had his vehicle. I was on scene. I seen the weaponry in his car, so I knew that we had taken away his vehicle and a lot of his weapons. We knew he had a handgun and a vest on. But other than that, I was pretty confident that we had, significantly interrupted his plan. But I was really worried about how long he'd been doing this. And this has been going on for 5 hours all night long, and we're the first one to catch him. I was concerned.
Okay. Before I ask you about the search, can I just ask you to reflect, like, your officers went there, were sent there on a hunch, just to go check on your local state rep. How does that hit you, knowing the foresight that they clearly had? Yeah,
so incredible. So I learned that because our sergeant, Norden, was on scene. He's our SWAT commander. So he was already, obviously this happened, he immediately got dressed as in the SWAT stuff, paged out SWAT, and came up here. So when I arrived on scene, he was on scene and he was the incident commander running the SWAT team who was in action of sending drones in the house. And so when he had a break, I quickly touched base with him to kind of get caught up. And he expressed to me, I'm like, hey, how did we get here? And he's like, I gotta be honest with you, Chief. I heard Hoffman had been shot up in Champlain, and I started thinking to myself, like, Melissa, whenever something happens, she'll usually ask us to drive by her house, and she's had some idle threats over the years by constituents. And so he's like, I just thought to myself, like, we should just drive by her house. So he said, I seen a couple cops, and I said, hey, go drive by this address. And those cops didn't even know where she lived or who she was. Those were just younger officers, and that sergeant's like, go to this address and drive by, just check. And they pulled up, and this is what they seen, was him standing at the door. He had clearly already knocked. The officer didn't see that, and he was waiting for the door to open, and that's exactly when the officer stepped out of his car.
How proud are you of that police work?
Words don't describe it. I mean, just you go from the sergeant's decision, the officers who went there and then engaged him. You have what looks like a police officer pulling his gun, shooting another person. Not every cop would think, boy, I should start shooting that police officer, right? Now, he knew that this person could be dressed like the police, but that's just a really hard decision. I had imagined that officer didn't hesitate at all. And then immediately they approached and seen Mark. They believing the suspect was likely down in the basement, they still approached and tried to rescue Mark. They pulled him out, started CPR, trying to rescue him. And so that was just the beginning of an incredible 43 hours where I've seen some of the most amazing human beings perform at the highest level possible.
Is there any doubt in your mind that your officers stopped him from taking more lives, potentially killing more politicians?
No question. No question, those officers saved lives. I mean, he does not stop. He had already been to 4 addresses. That was the 4th address that we caught him at. This was going to be catastrophic over the next couple hours.
Even more catastrophic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The search, massive. Have you ever seen a search like that in your career?
No.
A manhunt like that?
Not like this. Not like this. Not, hundreds and hundreds of people in this building working, drafting search warrants, and the command and control was phenomenal. I mean, to be organized, from 3:30 in the morning, being called out, everybody showing up in here, and within a couple of hours, it was like a well-oiled machine tracking where he could have gone, coming up with an address in Fremont, in Minneapolis, where he did go, change clothes, getting video of it, contacting with family members. Like the amount of incredible work that was done by this team, and again, it was the team. It was the FBI, it was the marshals, it was absolutely the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Phenomenal, each and every one of them.
Did you get much sleep during those 48 hours?
No, I slept good last night, though.
You did?
Yeah.
Is that the first time since?
Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, it's been a lot going on, and even when you get some downtime to sleep, it's a big operation. And as a police chief, for me, one thing I'm continuously concerned about is the men and women that I'm here to protect, right? Like, I send them out to do a really tough job. The worst call I'd never want to get is one of them's been hurt or, God forbid, injured or killed. And this individual clearly presented a huge danger to community, to legislators, but also to my staff. And so I was really worried about, right, if and when, because this wasn't going to stop, we had to find him. Like, it was not going to stop. The search, the investigation would continue on until we found him, and I would have predicted that it was going to end in some sort of gunfight.
That was the fear?
It absolutely was my fear.
A real fear?
Yeah.
Was that just because what you had seen from him already, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, he's nothing short of a monster. I mean, this is horrible. I think the U.S. Attorney described it as, things nightmares are made of, and that's absolutely it. Going to your house, knocking on the door, posing as a police officer, getting you to, violating that security, getting you to open the door, and then just cold-bloodedly killing you. Incredibly dangerous human being.
I imagine you see a lot of monsters in your job, though. Where does he rank?
Boy, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. It feels like number one.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, just again, the violation of the public trust really weighs in this. I think attack on the democracy really hits home with me, and I say that because for us in Minnesota, and I think across the nation, you're messing with our way of life. Like our system, our democracy, our elected officials who put people in positions to make decisions, and then now you're going to go kill them. I don't know, because he didn't like their decisions, didn't like who they represented. To me, that's just a real attack on our way of life and just cannot be tolerated.
Is this going to change how you, security around, or should it change? Let me ask that again. Should this change, or will this change, in your opinion, security around lawmakers in the future?
I know it's starting the conversation. I already received some phone calls from U.S. senators, and they wanted to have that conversation, and I know it's on their minds. I think with you see the amount of political violence that we're seeing across the nation, it's a real conversation that we have to have. And then we've never had more mental illness in this country than we do now. So we can't get to a place where we don't have good people willing to be a lawmaker because they're fearful of, somebody breaking into their house, somebody shooting them. Violence, that can't happen. We have to have people that are willing to help run this country and make laws and represent us as the people. And again, to me, that's our way of life. That's what the United States is founded on. We cannot tolerate what happened here.
A couple more detailed questions that I'll ask you. You told me, was it your SWAT team or your officers who were involved in the arrest specifically? SWAT?
So there was the SWAT team, yeah.
Okay.
But there's actually 20 SWAT teams down there at the time converging on the suspect.
Can I ask, so then, apologies, correct verbiage, SWAT officers, is that accurate?
Sure.
Okay. Some of your SWAT officers were involved in his arrest.
Yep.
Was that, I guess, a bit of a gratifying moment, a satisfying moment for them to bring him in?
I think so. I mean, I say that because one of them sent me a picture right when they had him, right? Said, quite honestly, said, "Can I go fishing now?" Like, for him it was, we've been hunting this guy for 43 hours, and we did it. I think it was gratifying. I think it was important for this organization to be part of it every step of the way. Mr. Bolter came into our community, killed our legislator, and then fled. Again, you don't get to do that.
He came in posing as one of you, effectively.
Exactly. And so I think he started something that we just felt like we had to finish for certainly Melissa's family, for this community, and I would argue for the state of Minnesota, and quite honestly, maybe the nation. Like, people sent letters, emails, gifts, food that came here. People, good people, wanted him captured.
What was the emotional impact for you? Or I guess, what was the emotion that hit you when you found out he'd been arrested, he'd been captured?
Relief. I was just really worried about an officer getting injured or killed. That was my fear. So when he was taken into custody, it was just relief. Like, he's in custody. I'm very confident the system will do its job. The amount of evidence mounted against him is unbelievable. But now also begins the work and the grieving in the community, and that's what we're starting now with community healing sessions. Trying to, we still have an entire teams of detectives working on this. We still got to figure out motive, what other plans, was there accomplices, who helped him, all that still has to be done. So we're talking weeks to months of investigation yet to do.
Is there anything you can tell me about potential accomplices involving his wife? She's been brought up, the traffic stop has been brought up. Is there anything you can tell us there?
I would just say that no stone is being left unturned, so the investigation continues. If somebody helped him in any way, they will be held accountable.
Can you tell me whether or not she's been cleared in that investigation?
I would say nobody's been cleared in this investigation.
Understood. Was that your officers that stopped her on Saturday? Was that, I don't know what jurisdiction that was in, actually.
Yeah, it was not.
Okay.
It was not our officers.
Understood. Can I ask you another version of the same question? Sometimes we do this for ones that we think we definitely want to use.
Yeah.
About the foresight of your office, of your sergeant. Just the idea that your sergeant had a hunch to go check on this local lawmaker, and that in turn surprised and maybe thwarted the plan of this suspect. How does that hit you, that there was that foresight?
I've known that sergeant for a long time. Phenomenal police officer. Like, when you have a problem at your house, you hope somebody like him shows up. But even this, for him, who's a great cop, to have the intuition to go, right? Because I think my thought would have been like, oh, can I help up at the scene? Has Hoffman's family been notified? He was thinking in terms of, man, is this an attack, right? Is this an attack on a senator? Could our representative be next, Melissa? There's a lot of representatives in the state, right? Like, so for him to think through and go, no, we're going to drive by, and then tell two police, because he's in a position of authority, so he tells a couple officers, go by this house, here's the address, check and make sure everything's okay at her house. Incredible intuition. And quite honestly, saved lives. There's just no question about it. We'll never know how many, but we know it saved other lives.
Could I ask you about it in a broader sense of your department, since we want to name him and show him, but until he speaks, I think we're kind of wanting to keep it a little bit vague, and especially for TV because we can't show him.
Yeah.
How proud are you of your department that foresight existed to go check on this lawmaker and then ended up thwarting this guy's plan, seemingly?
Super proud. I mean, we work really hard to have a high-performing organization, and this is just a demonstration of that, to being thoughtful about being the best at everything that we can do. And this is an example where, he's technically off duty. Like, he should be going home, and his brain is thinking through, how do I protect Melissa Hortman, who, at the time, there was no reason to think he would be going there, right? Like, it was more likely that John Hoffman may have been the sole target. But that sergeant being willing to think outside the box and go, no, we're going to go proactively check on Melissa just to make sure the house is okay. Incredible.
One detail I realized somebody asked a couple days ago that we haven't been able to ask yet. Were they the only two and the dog in the house? Like, the children were not there, or were they?
They're not. They're
Okay.
adult children.
Yeah.
And it was just the dog, Melissa, and Mark that were in the home.
Okay, understood. Anything you can think of that I'm leaving out?
Just is any potential procedural changes based on future attackers who are mimicking law enforcement? Is there anything that you're looking at, like maybe passive communication? I know it's early, but she'll ask it better than I can.
Any protocol changes surrounding security around lawmakers, or I guess, what, if anything, is your team taking away from this experience that might impact how you handle security around lawmakers or elsewhere in the future?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I think it's going to be talked about at great lengths here in the near future. I can tell you that for our officers, we're going to make it clear to them that for community members, this is troublesome, and it should be. It's troublesome for us. So if people question you as a police officer, say, you know what, I understand why you're asking, please call 911 right now and verify that I am a police officer. And that's something that we can do as police officers, is really recognize and be empathetic to citizens that they are concerned about it. And if they appear to be concerned, or they bring it up, like, are you a real police officer? I'm scared to open the door, or I don't want to get out of the vehicle. We should take the olive branch and hand it over and go, you know what, call 911 and validate it. That's absolutely your right to do that. And so that's a small thing that we can do, but the truth is, in Minnesota right now, I believe it's a misdemeanor to pose as a police officer. So if you think of, take away the gun charge, if you think of Mr. Bolter, if he got caught impersonating a police officer, we would give him a ticket. I think we need to rethink that.
It's a great answer. That's really helpful. One more question for you. I just thought of this. Have you seen him since he was arrested?
No.
Okay. Do you have any interest in being face-to-face with him?
No.
Why not?
My job's to run a police department, do an objective investigation. Would I be lying if I didn't say this is a little personal? It's a little personal. Yeah. Like, he did a lot of damage in my community, to my lawmaker. A little personal, but my job's, is to bring him to justice, and that's what the men and women of this organization and the great law enforcement across the state did. We did our job. We'll finish it and hand it over to the judicial system.
Okay, great. Anything that I should be asking you that you can think of that you...
No, I think it was good.
Right. Okay. Great. Yeah. Great answers.
Great.
Thank you for just talking like a normal person. And
I am a normal person.
I know.
All right, so you just saw here on Live Impact News a one-on-one with one of the reporters out in the Minnesota area speaking with authorities following the capture, as we've been talking about at length here this week, of the suspect in the slaying of a Minnesota state lawmaker and her husband, and the attempted assassination of a state senator and his wife. And we actually shared with you as well, important to remind you, that the late husband in this case, the gentleman who passed away, actually has Raleigh ties, so Carolina ties there. So Mark Hortman, he was the husband of Democratic former House Speaker Melissa Hortman. And so we actually heard for you here on WCNC Plus, classmates reflecting on his life and legacy from right here in Carolina. So with that, we want to turn to a big global headline. We've got lots of folks on edge thinking about what could happen here with the conflict between Iran and Israel. Of course, we shared with you around this time, right here on Live Impact News, the fact that President Trump was cutting short his visit to the G7 in Canada to come back to D.C. and have his meeting with the national security advisors to kind of determine what role the U.S. might play going forward in the conflict. So let's listen to the State Department briefing. Certainly this topic addressed here tonight. And then, of course, anything big and breaking, we'll jump back in.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome back. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Everyone's set? We're good? Great. Welcome aboard, everyone. Thank you again for being here. For generations, the Middle East has been dealing with the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, with the attack on Israel on October 7th by Hamas reminding us of what's at stake. Due to the wisdom of the American people, President Trump's election to a second term has offered the world a chance to see an American leader committed to solving many of the world's existential threats with determination. Now, as the conflict between Israel and Iran continues, President Trump has also been clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also stated that fact, as he has traveled the world working to implement President Trump's vision of peace and security. That statement has also been uttered from this podium many times. The fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon is clear. As the White House reminds us, since taking office, President Trump has clearly stated no fewer than a dozen times that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, for anyone who's unclear on that fact. President Trump has made the same pledge no fewer than 40 times before taking office, even as far back as 2011. One of the highest priorities of the Trump administration is the safety and security of the American people. To that end, the Department of State has established the Middle East Task Force to help coordinate support for U.S. citizens, our U.S. diplomatic missions, and personnel and diplomatic engagement. The task force is operating 24 hours a day. Over the past week, to help keep U.S. citizens informed, we have issued more than 30 security alerts to countries in the region and updated the travel advisories for Iraq and Israel. We remind U.S. citizens not to travel to Israel or Iraq and not to travel to Iran under any circumstances. We continue to monitor the complex and rapidly evolving situation on the ground as we continue to assess and address the needs of U.S. citizens. We urge all U.S. citizens to regularly visit travel.state.gov for the latest travel advisories and security updates, and to enroll in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, also known as STEP, to receive timely alerts and guidance from the State Department. For Americans needing assistance, and there we have a bit of the website there for you, call +1 202 501 4444. That number again is +1 202 501 4444. If you're on that website, you can also click on that red box It will take you to a page where you can search for the embassy of your interest, where you are, where you would like to connect to be able to get help from the embassy in the country where you are. And of course, the number's there as well for your closest U.S. embassy. I also want to add a couple other things here as we're dealing with this. It is certainly a rapidly evolving dynamic, but to conclude the topper here today, I want to recognize the State Department and other U.S. government teams around the world working under threat on behalf of the American people, particularly those in Israel and Ukraine, who spent another night sheltering in bunkers as they came under attack. Our priority is the safety of Americans overseas and here at home. It is the priority of Secretary Marco Rubio. It is the priority of everyone who works in this building, and the thousands of American citizens who work anonymously and whom you will never see, who are working in embassies and consulates around the world and working with those local nations to be there for American citizens and to help facilitate American diplomacy. Our priority is the safety of Americans, yes, here at home, but also overseas. We thank all of those working on behalf of the American people, all of you watching from home and from around the world. We thank you. And for everyone around the nation, we know and honor your work as we begin another briefing here, ready to take your questions. All right. Yes, sir.
Yes. Hi, Tammy. Thanks. Thanks for that. Could you give us some more details on this task force, how it's going to work, and specifically if it's going to help Americans potentially leave the region, be repatriated, or depending on the countries that they're in, and any more details you can give on that?
Right. I won't be giving you, just as a reminder of how today is a little bit of a different day for the briefing. There is always things that I can't say to you. And yet we have a long back and forth. Sometimes we have a little bit of a debate. I won't engage in that today. My responses will be perhaps a bit quicker than usual, and I'll be moving around more quickly to reach as many of you as I can. There will be less that I can answer for you because of the circumstances that we're dealing with around the world. So it is, just want you to know it's not personal, but we're working on certain things like the task force as an example. The task force is a group of people who are working, taking the calls of people, of American citizens around the world, making sure that they get connected with what they may need in that region. I won't go into the details of all that the task forces do, of course, but it's about information, making sure people here at the State Department and people that we get the information we need, but also people around the world, American citizens, get directed to the information that they may need as well. So I'll leave it at that, but this is something that the State Department does when there's a situation that requires it, and this is one of those times.
Tammy, I'm sorry. Could I just ask
sure, Matt. Sure, of course.
The phone number that you get, if you call that number, which I can do right now, who do you get?
You get an individual who is
task force, or?
No, you don't get the task force. That phone number is a general phone number. The task force is busy, but it is a separate unit that is established to take the calls to assist American citizens who call to the embassies. Particularly, you're going to be referred to embassies who can help you get what it is you need. So good question. Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, Andrea.
Just a quick question. There's some specific consular needs. One in particular that I'm aware of, and there may be more than one, is an American citizen in Iran, where there is no embassy, no consulate. Mm-hmm. Would that be of the Swiss protectorate? Would there be other options? Is consular affairs give any advice as to what to do about Americans right now stuck in?
I can't speak to any advice or information regarding individuals in Iran at this point.
And what about American Israelis or Israeli Americans, either wanting to come out or wanting to get back home? LL, I believe, has resumed flights in some small measure for people who, some people have kids in Israel and they were visiting the States. And they're American citizens. Is there anything that they can do? Where should they call this number?
Well, obviously, if you know, and we encourage every American when you travel, is to contact your local embassy or consulate, let them know you're there, make sure you know where they are, have those numbers, and that's what I would recommend, no matter where you're traveling, but certainly in the Middle East, is know where those entities are, know where the embassy is. So if you're in Israel, obviously it's Tel Aviv or it's Jerusalem.
Are they open?
Well, they will answer their phone. So there's contacts that can happen in the midst of all of this. And of course, I think that's the advice for wherever you are. But clearly, if you're in a certain area, it's obvious in this case that there are certain limitations in that region, and that contact the embassy, the one that is nearest to you, and you will, at the very least, make sure they know where you are, but also they will give you some options for the plans that you would like to make. Yes, Humaira.
Tammy, I understand your limitations, but I have to ask this.
I know you do. It's your job, and I appreciate that. I'm here to take questions, not necessarily always answer them.
Yeah, last night
ma'am.
President Trump said he wants a real end, not a ceasefire. So does the United States support or pursue regime change in Iran? Or are we just talking about dismantling Iran's nuclear enrichment? And would that include the United States helping Israel strike Fordo?
Well, I'm certainly not going to characterize what President Trump says or tweets, for that matter. He doesn't need characterizing. He's one of the most transparent, one of the most clear individuals that we've known. I think that we can take his word for his word, but I'm not going to speculate on, in a larger sense, what that would mean. That is up to the president. He is the singular guiding hand about what will be occurring from this point forward, as he has been. And I think that dynamic is pretty clear. He says he wants an end, as he has said about every conflict that he has, as a peacemaker, worked to stop peacefully through diplomacy. That has been his commitment. And he wants these things, as he said, about a number of situations, not for a month or 6 months, but durable ends to this nature of forever wars. And that has been his posture, and that's his posture now.
Okay, I have an easier follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
How many people...
I'll take a hard one, too. I'd say.
How many people so far have contacted U.S. missions in Israel or elsewhere, American citizens, seeking help to depart the country that they're in the Middle East?
Yes, I won't discuss those details or the numbers involved with the embassies.
Are you guys planning to facilitate charter planes to get people out or military evacuation?
I will not discuss what our plans are in that regard. Yes, ma'am.
Just to follow up on that really quickly.
Sure.
Are you guys considering at all operations that would help Americans who want to leave the region from evacuating?
I know that our commitment is to the safety and security of Americans around the world. All right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Tammy, would the U.S. government like to see a regime change in Iran?
First of all, I'm certainly not going to remotely address that. It would require me to speculate or speak on behalf of the president, which I will not do. What we've seen, though, is clear, is months and repeated statements that all he wants is a peaceful world. His activity and the nature of the actions that the United States has taken and his special envoys have been rooted in one thing, which is negotiations, looking for diplomatic solutions to generational problems that he wants solved diplomatically. That has been his constant posture. And there has been nothing that has changed in what he wishes for, what he would hope to accomplish. And so, of course, that's not something I'm going to address.
Is the U.S. government and the Israeli government on the same page when it comes to the intelligence about Iran's nuclear weapons program?
That is a question for the White House and perhaps the NSC. That's not something I can answer here. Nadia.
Thank you, Tammy. The president said he wants to see Iran offers unconditional surrender. I'm not going to ask you to comment on the president's statement, but I'm going to ask you if the secretary is involved in any kind of diplomatic missions with his allies, with the Germans, with the French, trying to offer something to the Iranians as a way out.
Well, again, would not speak on the details of any diplomatic conversations, if they occurred, between whom, what those details would be. We know, of course, the Secretary and the President were at the G7. Their constant work from the moment they came to office has been to, and certainly Secretary Rubio, was to open up conversations and to lead the world through diplomacy to make a difference. But that's the only thing that would guide me when it comes to the nature of the decisions they're making at this point. Yes, ma'am.
Without getting into the details of the conversations, is the door to diplomacy with Iran on its nuclear program still open from the U.S. perspective?
That would be a decision made by President Trump.
Have you heard from the Iranians signaling interest in continuing discussions?
That is not something that I can speak to. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, going back to the consular piece of this in Israel, the latest security alert from the embassy there still says that the embassy is not in a place to evacuate or directly assist Americans. Do you have any timeline on when that might change for the Americans who are stranded in that country? And just looking at how quickly the security situation has changed there. The travel alert was raised to a level 4 from a level 3 for the entirety of the country. Is that a sign that the State Department was caught on its back foot a little bit by this change because Americans still can't get help?
I can say the answer to that last question is no. We are working 24/7 to ensure the safety and the security of Americans around the world. I can say that the Department of State is always planning for contingencies to assist private U.S. citizens' departure from crisis areas, and we will alert the U.S. citizenry community if there is and when there is additional information to share regarding their options during any crisis, but certainly this one as well. When it comes to how quickly people can expect a dynamic, the American government, the State Department, our militaries, you've seen all of these assets, all of these departments involved in this dynamic in one fashion or another, are working exclusively for the safety of this nation and the safety of the American people wherever they may be. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Tammy. At the top, you said that you're advising U.S. citizens not to travel to Israel or Iraq or Iran under any circumstances. Do you have any more general guidance for Americans in the Middle East, more broadly as a region? Are there other countries that you're advocating people depart from?
Well, at our website, we have our travel alerts. We also have moved them on our State Department Twitter, our social media accounts. Those are for the public to see. Would there be, what is the specific one for people to look to if they want to look for specific country travel alerts? Is it travel.state.gov? So travel.state.gov, and you will see every travel alert there for you, depending on if you're going to be traveling. It is not just for the Middle East, or if you're in a country right now, you can get your information there. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Two questions. In your top, you also recognize American diplomats serving in Ukraine and Israel who spent another night in a bunker.
Yes.
But one of American citizens happened to be killed by the Russians last night in Ukraine. Do you have any comment on will the U.S. government act to protect American citizens in Ukraine?
Yes, we are aware of last night's attack on Kyiv, which resulted in numerous casualties, including the tragic death of a U.S. citizen. We condemn those strikes and extend our deepest condolences to the victims and to the families of all those affected. The President, in the recent past, has made his thoughts.
Hey, good evening, folks. Vanessa Rufus here in the Live Impact News studio. Just wanted to catch everyone up to speed. If you're just joining our stream tonight, we're listening in right now to an earlier briefing from the State Department. So this is State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce. As you can imagine, talking a lot about the conflict between Israel and Iran, since that is definitely taking a lot of focus at this point. Of course, we've been covering for you at length day after day the escalating conflict, starting with launch of attacks by Israel against Iran. We're actually hearing latest counts, 224 people killed since Israel began that bombing on Friday, 24 people killed in Israel from retaliatory strikes. And we are seeing, of course, now a lot of congregating of the president and his national security advisors in the cabinet talking about where does the U.S. fit into this situation? Where does the U.S. go from here as far as its role in easing this conflict. We do know that the Pentagon is apparently expediting an aircraft carrier out to the Middle East and other ships as well, but have yet to hear any further sort of comment on what other measures the U.S. might be taking. So we'll send you back here to the briefing in full. You can listen in once again to the spokesperson, Tammy Bruce, taking questions from reporters.
Well, I again can't characterize the feelings of the President of the United States. We know that he is our lead. We know that he is the guiding hand. We know that he is one of a few who know all the details, and he is clearly has a mission and an agenda that has involved diplomacy and changing the world for the better for people. In the meantime, of course, things change. Our experiences change. He's making comments that are a reflection of what what matters to him, and of course, what matters to the President matters to the State Department and every other department. I think that it is fair to say that his leadership and his re-election to the second term was because people here in the United States were tired of the status quo, and what the world has seen is a peacemaker and someone who can make a difference, and that's what they're looking forward to.
Final question. Can I get in one more?
One more.
There's no special envoy for Iran. Several key locations in the Middle East don't have a confirmed ambassador. We speak often about the day after situation in Gaza. What about the day after situation in Iran? Is the State Department ready for it?
Well, the State Department and the Trump administration, while you may not see things immediately, just because it's not maybe in the news or you're not present for things that occur, doesn't mean they're not occurring. I would remind everyone that the State Department, as I've found out, is sort of like the military. It's 24/7. It is not something that is a basic 8 to 5 dynamic. And it's because people are working around the world constantly. It is literally their mission. Personally, their work is what they do and are committed to. So while you may see a certain thing in a static framework, it doesn't mean that we have not worked on that or are not working on that or that things will begin to happen. So it's just a reminder that it's not about the day after. We are working before, during, and after. It is the anticipation of people with history and an experience when it comes to the history, not just of a building and of a department of the United States, but the history of people working on diplomatic issues throughout the world. And they work for this department. They are committed to those issues, and that is what makes the State Department so effective, in addition to the leadership that is afforded by Marco Rubio, as guided by Donald Trump. Yes, sir, you've been waiting.
Tammy, the NATO summit is in The Hague next week.
Yes.
President Trump and Secretary Rubio came back early from the G7 summit because of the nature of what's going on in the Middle East. If this situation is still unfolding next week, should we expect some kind of changes to the delegation, changes to travel? Should we be anticipating that if the situation is still ongoing?
You know, I can't tell you if anything will change. I know it has not so far, but as we have experienced from day to day or even sometimes hour to hour, things do change. This is a very dynamic event. We've all had our special situations that we're interested in, and we all want diplomacy to work, and we've been cheering on summits and ceasefire discussions, etc. But this is something that is moving, as things tend to, very rapidly. So I would say that anything is possible, but at this point in time, that is still certainly on the books. But that's going to be obviously that's a presidential trip. That's going to be up to the White House, and I'm sure will be affected by their decision making based on what they see. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tammy. 2 questions, please. First of all,
can you tell me, sir?
Yeah, Alan Fisher from Al Jazeera English.
Very good. How do you do?
Fine, thank you. The U.S. intelligence assessment on March 26 was that Iran was not working towards a nuclear bomb. What's changed? That the U.S. position seems to be that it was very close.
Well, again, I can't speak to intelligence assessments, what may or may not have changed, or to the fact that it is President Trump and his team who are seeing things that matter when it comes to the decision-making, and I think that that's what's happened here.
Second question is, if the president in his first term was willing to give the Taliban 18 months to come up with a deal? Why was there only 60 days given to the Iranians to discuss something which is much more complicated?
Again, I'm not going to discuss the details of the decisions made by the president. Andrea?
No, I'm just saying that was Tulsi Gabbard's testimony in open session to the committees.
Well, yes, and as I've noted, today is not that day. Next, yes? Yes, sir. Tie in the white shirt.
Thank
Is that you just suggesting that
Andrea, we're moving on, please. Let's please
I'm just
be
trying to
able
get
to
a
manage this. Sir, in the back there.
Thank you, Tammy. My question is, the other week we were talking about the negotiations between Iran and the U.S., and the president was very optimistic about it. And now drastically everything has changed, and we are talking almost about a full-scale war between Israel and Iran. How do you name the procedure right now? Has the negotiations failed, or how can we name it? My second question will be, the Iranian state TV has been targeted by the Israeli Air Force. How do you see that? Do you see a state TV channel as a legitimate target?
Well, you'd have to ask Israel about their decisions when it comes to the choices with what they strike and what they don't. And on your first question, which now is already, what was your first question?
My first question, after all this, after these escalations, how do you name
I would say that you would look to the President of the United States for how he is characterizing what has occurred. And he is very open and transparent with that, and does it with his many conversations with the media and also on Truth Social. He is clearly accessible, certainly with his remarks, and he has said a number of things on social media that I think might answer your question. Yes, Saeed.
Thank you. Very quick question on Gaza. Can I do that?
Of course. Well, yeah, are we continuing still with it? I will come to you on Gaza, Saeed, I promise. But let's continue with the topic at hand. So yes, sir, in the back.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Two questions. One question on Iraq related to Iran. Iranian-backed group Qatar Hezbollah threatens the U.S. against interfering in the Israel-Iran conflict, which they said any American intervention in the conflict would prompt the group to target the U.S. interests across the region. Have you reached to the Iraqi government, and what's your message to these groups? And the second question, what's the State Department's assessment of diplomacy? Have you put diplomacy on a side, or you still believe that diplomacy can work with Iran?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment on the nature of how the White House or the President or the DOD will respond to certain remarks or demands made by someone. So you'll have to ask the DOD regarding their reaction in that regard. I would also, though, I know that the President's Truth Social, he's made it very clear, even I think today, and I think I've got that right here. This is, again, one of the things we've learned about President Trump is that when he tweets, when he speaks, the world watches, and it's the most clear framework that we can learn of his approach. He has, I don't know if I can get to the exact one, but he has made it very clear that, oh yes, here we go. He has noted that we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers, or our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He is making it clear, I think, here regarding certain choices on the ground that are being made, and that what we've asked for regularly is, and what he has made clear is that we were not a part of the initiation of this, certainly. We're not a part of Israel's attacks on Iran. That I think was stated very clearly by both Secretary Rubio and the President. And that's important for them, for people to know. And in this case, of course, the President has made it clear that if Americans are hurt, or in this case, a missile shot at civilians or American soldiers, that there would be a repercussion. I think that would not be surprising. All right, we'll go back. Well, More on Iran. We'll close with you, sir.
Thank you so much. Could you tell us about the role of partner countries in mediation efforts with Iran, like Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE? President Trump recently concluded successful trip to the Middle East. So what can you tell us about the role of these partner countries?
It's clearly he went with a goal in mind. He makes deals. He's the best deal maker in the world. These partners in the Middle East that we have, they understand clearly our intentions and what our goals are. Thankfully, again, to the approach and the style of President Trump. I think that when it comes to, again, the best person who could explain his feelings and thoughts about what's accomplished on any issue is the President himself. So I'd refer you back to what he writes and what he is posting on, I think, a very regular basis, which is helpful to people like me, and I think to the world at large as well.
Despite Israel's concerns, can I one more? Despite Israel's concerns, President Trump is still trying to negotiate with Iran for a nuclear deal, showing that his priority is peace in the region. President Trump has once again recently offered to mediate on Kashmir, but the Modi government says that they don't need Trump's help. Does President Trump need Modi permission to bring peace in South Asia by resolving the Kashmir issue?
Well, yes, this is every country, as President Trump has stated, is a right to define its own future. He offers his help, and it's up to whoever he's offering it to whether or not they'll accept it. We live in a fascinating, exciting time where we've got a man who can make the difference, and he's generous about making that difference. He could have chosen to have this term be about anything other than peace and making America great again, but he's stuck with that. He's committed to that. It is part of his overall commitment to the country. So I would not speak to the nature of another country's decision-making. That's up to them. But I think all of us are grateful that we have a president who's willing to help and wants to help. Now, you have one more in Iran, and then we'll go to Saeed.
Can you confirm a report that the former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has been killed in Tehran?
I can't confirm that or report on that or discuss it. All right, thank you. Saeed.
Thank you. Very quick question on Gaza. In the last 48 hours or the last 3 days, dozens of Palestinians have been killed at the aid centers and so on. With everybody focused on Iran, this situation still garner some interest or attention from this building or from the United States of America? And are you urging the Israelis to hold off whatever the amount of firepower they're firing at these aid seekers?
Well, we of course are always saddened to hear reports about any mass casualty situation or shootings. I don't know who isn't, no matter what the dynamic. The IDF has said a particular incident is under review, and that is helpful, and we'll see what their review comes up with. In the meantime, I think it is important also when it comes to the nature of the efforts to get aid and food to the Gazans. We now know, can report that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation now is working at 4 distribution sites and has distributed nearly 26 million meals to date. So it is, again, a conversation about whether or not the State Department cares. Every day there's a demonstration. And when we think about the State Department, it's people. It's people who've committed their lives to a diplomatic life, to a life of foreign service, to a political life, to try to make the difference for the world. So we see that manifesting here. And as we also know with today's events and today's conversations, there's a reason why we need people like President Trump and the American commitment to peace abroad. All right?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been reported over the weekend that the President would expand the travel ban to 36 other countries. A lot of them, from what I understand, are in Africa. There's already 19 countries that are affected by the travel ban to a different extent. Can you share any details, elements you have on this plan?
I'm going to speak a little bit about it, not into the detail of what about the decision making or the process in that regard, but But we are, of course, committed to protecting our nation's citizens by upholding the highest standards of national security and public safety through our visa process in particular, as laid out in President Trump's Executive Order 14161, protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. The visa adjudication process has got to ensure that U.S.-bound foreign travelers do not pose a threat to the national security and public safety of the United States. That is, I think, a very low bar, and is a bar that every nation should be able to adopt. To protect the national security.
All right, so you heard there quite a bit of the State Department briefing today, pretty much all focused on questions pertaining to the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. Be sure we'll keep you up to date with the very latest here on Live Impact News. Meantime, we'll turn you over to our next hour of programming. Stick with us for the news at 11, of course, right here on WCNC Charlotte.